In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
That was Republican Congressman Randy Fine of Florida on Fox News last week. Tucker Carlson tore into Fine over his suggestion that Gaza be nuked. Take a look.
It's evil, but how can you say something like that and not get expelled from Congress or the Republican? How can that person be a member of the Republican Party? We're going to nuke Gaza because of its culture. We're going to kill everybody because we don't like the culture, which, by the way, lots of Christians in Gaza, Muslims in Gaza.
Just innocent people in Gaza of all kinds.
Well, of course, but like to say there's some like Gazan culture that's cohesive, it's like, what? But we're going to kill them all because we don't like their culture.
In the latest update to the war, Gaza officials are saying that the IDF killed at least 27 people who were headed toward an aid distribution site on Tuesday, according to the AP. The IDF says that it fired near a few individual suspects after they ignored warning shots and approached them. The IDF also says that the casualties published by Hamas were exaggerated, but that they were investigating what happened.
Israel and Gaza have struggled to reach a ceasefire agreement. Per the New York Times, Hamas wants to keep having influence on Gaza and a permanent ceasefire. Israel, on the other hand, is seeking a temporary deal so that it could regenerate their efforts to eliminate Hamas. I should note that story about people being fired upon, I know has been heavily disputed by commentators who are more sympathetic to Israel. I have no idea what the truth of it is. I have not seen any redactions from media outlets that have reported on it. And my understanding is the IDF itself confirmed that something did happen, but has not specifically confirmed how many people were harmed or injured or killed. So I just flatly stating that I do not know what the reality of that story is right now. We can do an update on it later. In terms of, nuking everyone in Gaza is obviously not even a ridiculous suggestion, but a vile, evil suggestion. Also, the metaphor. Look, this is the conflict in the Middle East has been going on for a long time, and there are some really difficult situations between people who have been at war, in some cases for hundreds and thousands of years. And what I always come back to is this is a very difficult problem to resolve among people who really dislike each other and have been fighting each other for a really long time. What power does the U.S. have to fix this situation? What obligation do we have to be involved? If we are going to try to have diplomacy on both sides so we can come to a peaceful solution, I think the U.S. is happy to be involved in that role. I don't think the American people really want the U.S. involved in a military interventionist, take control of the situation, kill everyone who disagrees. I don't see how that's serving America first, frankly, which is why I'm glad to see Tucker Carlson, derided by mainstream media as some right-wing lunatic person, saying the peaceful thing, well, no, we're not going to come in and just wipe out everyone because we don't like that there are some terrorists there. We wouldn't like if someone that did that to us. There was terrorists hiding in my building in Navy Yard and the government wiped it off the map and killed everyone in it because there were a couple bad people. We would not accept that as just fine. So the metaphor totally fails.
I appreciate Tucker Carlson. He doesn't flinch in his stance. I think it's important when you're a public figure to be able to condemn even people that may have been looked at as political allies, like how people would look at maybe Tucker Carlson's relationship with the Republican Party. I think there's a deep concern about moral boundaries, and I think it's important to stress that Hamas is not all Gaza's citizens. So when we say blanket statements like that, we're really affecting lives. And although we don't have all the information about what's happening in Gaza, we know that people are dying for humanitarian aid and really needing it at the moment. And so we know that there are different reasons why they're not getting it, but the sites where they're going are hard to reach for many people because they're just in one particular part of the area. And so there has been back and forth about it getting out of control. People are starving, you know what I mean, and dying for food. And so obviously they're not just going to wait in line patiently when they haven't eaten properly in weeks. And so I think that there are, major concerns about how this is being dealt out to people. And it's important to find common ground on the issue and figure out, yes, while we want to bring all Israeli hostages home, we also want to make sure that the people who are of Gaza, the Muslim and Christian people who are literally just trying to raise their family and have their lives, are also able to just continue on and live their lives without being killed or starved or famished. And I think that that's a larger conversation about the U.S. involvement and how we can just make sure that there is some type of aid being properly delivered to people.
Also, Hamas is such a reprehensible organization that has no regard for the Palestinian people whatsoever, that causing more and more violence and destruction to the people of Gaza does not seem to dissuade Hamas from doing what, like, I understand from a simple, in fact, I have made this argument before in other contexts that, yeah, when you're at war with a state actor, or Hamas is sort of a quasi-state actor, they were elected at some point but are now illegitimate because they don't allow elections to be held anymore. It is, yeah, when you're at war with that, innocent people die in the course of war. That is very unfortunate. With Japan, which, yes, we dropped 2 nuclear weapons on Japan, the Japanese government, as the Japanese imperial leadership, as out of touch and indifferent to the people suffering as they were, they still did not want everyone in Japan to suffer the fate of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and decided to surrender at that point. If we started doing that to Gaza, Hamas would not surrender, because they are happy to have every single person there die. And so that must unfortunately constrain our behavior, because it would be one thing if that tactic would bring a swift and immediate end to this war, the surrender of a terrorist group, and a better future for the people of Gaza. Then you might actually make some kind of calculation like that. But it wouldn't work at the end of the day, because they're happy to have as many children die or buried in rubble as possible, because they're an insane terrorist death cult. So we have to deal with them in reality, which is get some kind of peace deal, or in the course of this, warfare, take them out person to person. I think it was a good thing when Yahya Sinwar was killed, and when other Hamas leaders are killed, the actual people responsible for October 7th. But it's not like being at war with Imperial Japan, where eventually they will reach a point their government surrenders or falls. That's not going to happen here. I wish it was otherwise, but it's not going to happen.
And I think Carlson is correct to look at our America First agenda. Does this fall in line with what America is doing first? So having blind allegiance to, a foreign policy that may be considered by most people, or probably all people, as very extreme, nuking Gaza at this point. How does that put America first with our involvement in this rift that, like you said, has been going on long before Trump's presidency or any presidency of our lifetime? And I think that that's an important conversation to look at, is like, how would that benefit us to support that extreme action, when we also have a part to play as the superpower of the world, kind of just making sure that we're trying to, at least if we're involved, support a peaceful resolution. That's the point of our involvement, even when it comes down to our allies like Israel. So I think that we have to make sure that we are having a larger conversation that doesn't dehumanize, real people on either side of the battle. We need to really remember there are people over there that are just like you and I, like you explained about your apartment building, how wild we would think that was if we just said, oh, get rid of the whole thing when you're there. And I understand Hamas has reportedly had, places and shelters that were wildly inappropriate, like hospitals or apartment buildings. But every time, I think that we're allowed to, not only as journalists, but as the American people, ask, is this where we really want all of our money going, to destroy them in this kind of way?
The moral responsibility is on Hamas's part, because they're, yes, like you said, they're putting their bases and they're hiding beneath hospitals and that sort of thing. So the moral responsibility for this calamity is on them, but that does not, then we still must factor that into our decision making about how we prosecute this war and what kind of diplomacy that we have to deal with who you're dealing with. That I always say that in international context, we can't live in some fantasy land where we snap our fingers and make all the bad people disappear. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Right. And the tone, the word culture, blanket statement, everyone in Gaza, is also not okay, because there's so many different cultures, just like in the U.S., that make up who we are as a nation, which differ in opinion, perspective. And so, we can't just look at them as non-human, because then it makes it easier to say things like that with no remorse.
Next up, is left-wing violence being normalized in America? We will debate that. Stay with us.